The spirits in old Japanese stories, they are not here to teach lessons. They do not punish the wicked. They simply exist, patient and waiting. Once, when Muso Kokushi, a priest of the Zen sect, was traveling alone through the province of Mino, he lost his way. He had wandered into the mountains where there was no one to ask for directions, no path he knew, no landmark he could name. For a long time he walked, not knowing where he was going. The light was failing, and he was beginning to fear he would find no shelter before the dark came fully down, when he saw it. On the top of a hill, still touched by the last red light of the sun, stood a small hermitage, an anjitsu, a simple dwelling built for a priest who wished to live apart from the world. It seemed to be in a ruinous condition, but he hurried toward it and found that it was inhabited by an old priest, from whom he asked for a place to sleep that night. The old man refused him, harshly, but he told Muso that there was a village in the valley below where food and lodging could be found. Muso went down into the valley and found the village, a handful of farm cottages, fewer than a dozen. He was kindly received at the home of the headman. When he arrived, 40 or 50 people were gathered in the main room. He was shown to a small separate room, given food, given bedding. He was very tired. He lay down and fell towards sleep. But a little before midnight, he was pulled back from sleep by the sound of loud weeping in the next room. Then the screens between the rooms were quietly pushed apart. A young man entered carrying a lantern. He knelt before the priest and said, "Reverend Sir, I have something painful to tell you. I am now the head of this house. Yesterday I was only the eldest son. But when you came here tonight, tired as you were, we did not wish to trouble you. And so we did not tell you that our father died only a few hours before you arrived. The people you saw in the next room, they are the people of this village. They came to pay their last respects to the dead. And now they are leaving. All of us. It is our custom. No one may remain in a village on the night after a death. We make the proper offerings and prayers, and then we go, leaving the body alone. Strange things always happen in a house where the body has been left this way. We think it would be better if you came with us. But perhaps, as you are a priest, you have no fear of demons or evil spirits. If you are willing to stay, you are welcome to this house. Though I must tell you, no one but a priest would dare to remain here tonight." Muso said, "I am grateful for your kindness, but I am sorry you did not tell me about your father when I arrived. Had I known, I could have performed the service before you left. As it is, I will perform it after you are gone, and I will stay with the body until morning. I am not afraid of ghosts or demons. Please feel no anxiety on my account." The young man was glad to hear it, and then they all left the house, every one of them, out into the dark. And Muso was alone. He went to the room where the dead man lay. The usual offerings had been set out. A small Buddhist lamp, a tomyo, was burning. He recited the service and performed the funeral rites. Then he entered into meditation. He remained so through several silent hours. There was no sound in the deserted village. But when the hush of the night was at its deepest, There entered noiselessly a shape, vague and vast. And in the same moment Muso found himself without power to move or speak. He saw the shape lift the corpse, as with hands, and devour it, more quickly than a cat devours a rat, beginning at the head and eating everything, the flesh, the hair, the bones, and even the funeral shroud. And the monstrous thing, having consumed the body, turned to the offerings and ate those too. Then it went away, as silently as it had come. When the villagers returned in the morning, no one seemed surprised to find the body gone and the offerings gone. The master of the house said, "What you have told us, Reverend Sir, agrees with what has been said about this matter from ancient times." Muso then asked, "Does not the priest on the hill sometimes perform the funeral service for your dead?" "What priest?" the young man asked. "The priest who directed me to this village yesterday evening," said Muso. "I called at his anjitsu on the hill. He refused me lodging, but he told me the way here." The listeners looked at one another, and after a moment of silence the master of the house said, "Reverend Sir, there is no priest on that hill. There is no anjitsu. For the time of many generations there has been no priest anywhere in this neighborhood." Muso said nothing more on the subject, for it was clear that his kind hosts believed he had been tricked by some goblin. But after saying his farewells and getting directions for his road, he decided to go back up the hill and look again for the hermitage, to find out whether he had truly been deceived. He found the anjitsu without any difficulty, and this time its aged occupant invited him to enter. When he had done so, the hermit humbly bowed down before him, exclaiming, "Ah, I am ashamed. I am very much ashamed. I am exceedingly ashamed." "You need not be ashamed for having refused me shelter," said Muso. "You sent me to the village, where I was very kindly treated. I thank you for that. It is not for the refusal that I am ashamed," the hermit said. "I am ashamed only that you should have seen me in my true shape. For it was I who devoured the corpse and the offerings before your eyes last night. I am a Jikininki, an eater of human flesh. A long, long time ago I was a priest in this region. The bodies of the mountain people who died were brought here, sometimes from great distances, so that I might say the holy service over them. But I performed the service only as a matter of business. I thought only of the food and clothing that my sacred calling allowed me to obtain. And because of this selfish impiety, I was reborn, immediately after my death, into the state of a Jikininki. Since then, I have been forced to feed upon the corpses of the dead in this district, every one of them. As you saw last night, Reverend Sir, I beg you, perform the Segaki service for me. Pray for me, so that I may escape from this horrible state of being." No sooner had he spoken than he vanished. The hermitage vanished with him, and Muso Kokushi found himself kneeling alone in the high grass, beside an ancient moss-grown tomb of the form called Gorin-ishi, which seemed to be the tomb of a priest. More than 700 years ago, at Dan-no-Ura, in the Straits of Shimonoseki, the last great battle was fought. The Hoichi clan and the Genji clan had been at war for a long, long time. And at Dan-no-Ura, the Hoichi perished utterly. Their warriors, their women, their children, and their infant emperor, the one now remembered as Antoku Tenno. He too was lost to the sea. That sea and that shore have been haunted ever since. There are strange crabs found along that coast. They are called Hoichi crabs. On their backs, they carry the shape of human faces. The fishermen say, these are the spirits of Hoichi warriors, still wandering, still restless, unable to find their way home. On dark nights, thousands of pale fires drift above the water. The fishermen call them onibi, demon fires. They hover and flicker just above the waves, and when the winds rise, a sound comes from that sea, a deep, terrible shouting, like the echo of a battle that never truly ended. In those early years, the Heike were far more restless than they are now. They would rise around ships passing in the night and try to drag them under. They watched for swimmers. They pulled them down. It was to bring peace to those dead that the Buddhist temple Amidaji was built at Akamagaseki. A cemetery was laid out close by near the beach. Monuments were raised, inscribed with the names of the drowned emperor and his great vassals. Buddhist rites were performed there, season after season, year after year, on behalf of the lost. After the temple was built and the tombs erected, the Heike grew quieter. But they did not disappear. They were not yet at peace. Some centuries after that long-ago battle, there lived at Akamagaseki a blind man named Hoichi. He was known throughout that region for two things: his voice and his biwa. From the time he was a child, he had been trained to sing and to play. And while still a boy, he had already surpassed his teachers. As a biwa hoshi, a lute priest, a traveling musician, he became celebrated above all others for his recitations of the war between the Heike and the Genji. It was said of him that when he sang the song of the Battle of Dan-no-Ura, even the goblins, the Kijin, could not keep themselves from weeping. At the beginning of his life, Hoichi was very poor. But the priest of the Amidaji was a man who loved poetry and music. He invited Hoichi often to the temple, to play and to sing. And eventually, moved by the young man's gift, the priest made him an offer. Hoichi would live at the temple. He would have a room. He would have food and shelter. In return, on certain evenings, he would play for the priest. Hoichi accepted gratefully. And so he came to live in the shadow of the Amidaji, beside the cemetery of the Heike dead. One summer night, the priest was called away to perform a service at the home of a parishioner who had died. He left with his acolyte, and Hoichi was alone. The night was hot, too hot to remain indoors. Hoichi went to sit on the veranda that looked out over the small garden at the rear of the temple. He brought his biwa. He played quietly, to ease the solitude. Midnight came. The priest did not return. Hoichi sat on, patient and still, listening to the dark. And then he heard footsteps. coming from the back gate, crossing the garden, moving toward him, stopping directly in front of where he sat. It was not the priest. A deep voice spoke his name, abrupt, commanding, the voice of a samurai addressing someone beneath him. Hoichi. The blind man startled. He could not find words. The voice came again, harder now, with the edge of an order. Hoichi. Hi, he answered, frightened. I am blind. I cannot know who calls. The voice softened, only slightly. There is nothing to fear. I have been sent to you with a message. My lord, a person of very high rank, is staying near Akamagaseki. He visited the site of the Battle of Dan-no-Ura today. He has heard of your skill. He wishes to hear you play and sing. You will bring your biwa, and come with me now. The assembly is waiting. In those days, the command of a samurai was not something a man refused. Hoichi put on his sandals. He took his biwa. He followed. The stranger guided him surely, but walked very fast, almost too fast. The hand that gripped his arm was like iron. The sound of armored footsteps rang against the road. Hoichi's fear began to ease. He told himself this was good fortune. A lord of high rank, perhaps a daimyo of the first class, wanting to hear him play. He had not dared to hope for such a thing. They stopped before a great gate. Hoichi was puzzled. He could not remember any large gate in that part of the town, except the main gate of the Amidaji itself. "Kaimon!" the samurai called. The gate was unbarred. They passed through. They crossed a garden. They halted before an entrance. The retainer called out, "I have brought Hoichi." And then, the sound of hurrying feet, sliding screens, opening doors, women's voices speaking in low, refined tones. By their language, Hoichi knew them to be servants of a noble household, but he could not imagine where he had been brought. He was helped up stone steps. He left his sandals at the top. A woman's hand guided him along corridors of smooth, polished wood, past pillared corners, across great stretches of matted floor, until he was led into the center of a vast room. He sensed a great assembly around him. The sound of silk rustling was like wind moving through a forest of leaves. Voices murmured in undertones, the refined, careful speech of a noble court. He was told to make himself comfortable. A kneeling cushion had been prepared for him. He settled upon it. He tuned his biwa. Then a woman's voice addressed him. The voice of a roho, a senior lady of the household. "It is required," she said, "that the history of the Heike be recited, with the accompaniment of the biwa." Hoichi asked carefully. The whole of the story would take many nights to tell. Which portion does the assembly wish to hear? The woman answered, "Recite the battle of Dan-no-Ura, for the pity of it is the most deep." And so Hoichi sang. He lifted his voice and gave everything he had to the chant of that long-ago battle, the rush of ships on bitter water, the hiss and flash of arrows, the crash of steel on helmets, the cries of men going down into the sea. His biwa sang with him, oars straining, waves breaking, the chaos and thunder of war. And all around him, in the pauses, he heard voices whispering praise. How marvelous an artist! Never in our province was such playing heard. There is no other singer like Hoichi in all the empire. And so he played still better. He sang still deeper into the story. He came at last to the end, to the fate of the women and children, to the death leap of Ni-no-Ama into the cold sea, the infant emperor held in her arms. And at that, every listener cried out a single long shuddering sound of grief. And then they wept. They wailed, loudly and wildly. And Hoichi, blind in the center of it all, was frightened by the force of what he had made. For a long time the mourning went on, and then slowly it grew quiet. And in the silence, the Roho spoke again. Our Lord is greatly pleased. He will reward you fittingly. He asks that you return each night for the next 6 nights. The retainer who brought you tonight will come for you again tomorrow. One more thing. Our Lord is traveling without announcement. You must tell no one of these visits. Speak of this to no one. Not a word. Now you may go. Hoichi thanked her. He was led out. The iron-handed retainer brought him back to the veranda of the temple. It was nearly dawn. The priest had not yet returned. No one had noticed Hoichi's absence. He lay down. He said nothing. The following night, the samurai came again. Again, Hoichi went. Again, he played and sang before that great silent assembly. But this time, his absence from the temple was noticed. In the morning, the priest came to him, gently, but with concern. Hoichi, we were worried. You went out alone in the night, blind, and without telling anyone. Where did you go? Hoichi said only that he'd had private business to attend to. The priest asked nothing more, but he was troubled. He feared that something was wrong, that the young man had been lured somewhere by something not of this world. That evening he quietly told the temple servants to watch Hoichi and to follow him if he left after dark. The next night, Hoichi slipped out again. The servants took their lanterns and followed, but it was raining, and the night was very dark, and Hoichi moved faster than seemed possible for a blind man. By the time they reached the road, he was gone. They searched. They knocked on doors. No one had seen him. At last, making their way back along the shore, they heard it. The sound of a biwa played furiously, coming from the cemetery of the Amidaji. They turned toward the darkness, and there, by the light of their lanterns, they found him. Hoichi was sitting alone in the rain before the memorial tomb of Antoku Tenno. His biwa rang and clattered in his hands. His voice rose in the chant of Dan no Ura. And all around him, above the graves, among the tombstones filling the black air, the fires of the dead were burning. Onibi. Countless pale flames, hovering like candles over the resting places of the Heike. More than any living person had ever seen gathered in one place. Hoichi-san, Hoichi-san, the servants called to him. You are bewitched. Come away. He did not seem to hear. His biwa rang louder. His chanting grew wilder. They grabbed him by the arms. They shouted into his ear. "Hoichi-san, come home with us. Now." He turned toward them and spoke with great dignity. "To interrupt me like this, before this august assembly, will not be tolerated." The servants, despite everything, almost laughed. But they held on to him. They pulled him to his feet. They dragged him home. At the temple, they dried him and fed him. And the priest sat with him and asked very quietly for the truth. Hoichi was silent for a long time. Then he told everything. The samurai at the gate, the great hall, the assembly of silk and whispers, the weeping, the voice of the roho, all of it. The priest listened. And when Hoichi had finished, the priest was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Hoichi, you are in great danger. You have not been visiting any house. You have been spending your nights in the cemetery, among the graves of the Heiki dead. It was before the tomb of Antoku Tenno himself that our servants found you tonight, sitting alone in the rain. Everything you experienced was an illusion. Everything except the calling of the dead. And by obeying them once, you have given them power over you. If you obey them again, they will destroy you. Tonight I must go out. I am called to perform another service. But before I leave, I will do what I can to protect you." Before sunset, the priest and his acolyte stripped Hoichi to bare skin. Then, with their finest brushes, they wrote upon him, across his chest and back, along his arms and legs, over his face and neck, across the palms of his hands, the soles of his feet, every part of his body covered in the flowing lines of the Holy Sutra, the Hanya Shin-kyo. When it was done, the priest gave Hoichi his instructions. "Tonight, when I have gone, you will go and sit on the veranda. You will wait. You will be called. No matter what happens, do not answer. Do not move. Do not make a sound. Sit as if in meditation. If you stir, if you speak, if you make any sound at all, they will tear you apart. Do not be afraid. Do not call for help. No help can reach you there. Do exactly as I say, and the danger will pass." The priest left. Hoichi went to the veranda. He set his biwa beside him. He folded his hands. He sat very still. The night settled around him. He did not cough. He did not shift. He breathed as quietly as he could. Hours passed. And then, footsteps on the road. Coming through the gate. Crossing the garden. Stopping in front of him. Hoichi. Silence. Hoichi. Silence. Hoichi. The voice was savage now. A long pause. Then a muttering, very close. No answer. Must find where the fellow is. Heavy feet stepped up onto the veranda. They walked slowly. They stopped, right beside him. Silence stretched out, long and terrible. Hoichi could feel his own heartbeat shaking through his whole body. He did not move. At last the voice spoke, almost to itself, low and puzzled. "Here is the biwa, but of the biwa player, I see only 2 ears. so that is why he did not answer. He has no mouth to answer with. There is nothing left of him but his ears. Very well. I shall take the ears to my lord, as proof that his commands were carried out as far as possible. And then, iron fingers closed around Hoichi's ears and tore them away. The pain was immense. He made no sound. The heavy footsteps moved back along the veranda, down into the garden, out through the gate, and were gone. From both sides of his head, Hoichi felt warmth running down, thick and slow. He did not raise his hands. He sat still. He waited for morning. Just before sunrise, the priest returned. He went straight to the veranda. He stepped forward, and his foot slipped on something wet. He looked down. By the light of his lantern, he saw the darkness of blood. And he saw Hoichi sitting exactly as he had been left, still as stone, in the posture of meditation, blood moving slowly from the wounds where his ears had been. Hoichi, what has happened to you? At the sound of his friend's voice, Hoichi finally let go. He wept, and he told what had passed in the night. The priest's voice broke. It is my fault entirely. We wrote the holy text on every part of you, but not your ears. I left that to my acolyte. I should have checked. I should have made certain. And now I am so deeply sorry, my friend. But the danger is over. They will not come for you again. I promise you that. With the help of a good physician, Hoichi recovered. Word of what had happened to him spread across the province, and then beyond it. Noble visitors came to Akamagaseki to hear him play. Gifts were given. He became, in time, a man of some wealth. But wherever he went, for the rest of his life, he was known by one name only. Not Hoichi the musician, not Hoichi the celebrated, but Mimi-Nashi-Hōichi. Hoichi, the Earless. Nearly 500 years ago, there was a samurai named Isogai Haidazaemon Taketsura in the service of the Lord Kikuji of Kyushu. This Isogai had inherited from many warlike ancestors a natural aptitude for military exercises and extraordinary strength. While yet a boy, he had surpassed his teachers in swordsmanship, in archery, and in the use of the spear. He had displayed from the earliest age all the qualities of a daring and skillful soldier. Afterwards, in the time of the Aikyo War, he distinguished himself so greatly that high honors were bestowed upon him. But when the house of Kikuji came to ruin, Isogai found himself without a master. He might easily have entered the service of another lord, but his heart remained true to the house he had served, and so he chose a different path entirely. He cut off his hair. He took the robe of a Buddhist priest. He took a new name, Kwairyo, and he went out into the world. But always, beneath the koromo of the priest, Kwairyo kept warm within him the heart of the samurai. As in other years he had laughed at peril, so now also he scorned danger. In all weathers and all seasons he journeyed to preach the good law in places where no other priest would have dared to go. For that was an age of violence and disorder. Upon the highways there was no safety for the solitary traveller, even if that traveller happened to be a priest. In the course of his first long journey, Kwaidan had occasion to pass through the province of Kai. One evening, as he was travelling through the mountains, darkness came down around him in a very lonesome district, leagues away from any village. He resigned himself to sleeping under the stars. He found a grassy place by the roadside, lay down, and made ready to sleep. He had always welcomed discomfort. A bare rock was for him a good bed when nothing better could be found. The root of a pine tree made an excellent pillow. His body was iron. He never troubled himself about dew or rain or frost or snow. Scarcely had he lain down when a man appeared on the road, carrying an axe and a great bundle of chopped wood. The woodcutter halted when he saw the priest lying there. He observed him in silence for a moment. Then he spoke, in a tone of genuine surprise. "What kind of man can you be, good sir, that you dare to lie down alone in such a place as this? There are haunters about here, many of them. Are you not afraid of hairy things?" Kwaidan answered cheerfully, "My friend, I am only a wandering priest, a cloud and water guest as people call it, and I am not in the least afraid of hairy things, goblin foxes, goblin badgers, or any creatures of that kind. As for lonesome places, I like them. They are suitable for meditation. I am accustomed to sleeping in the open air, and I have learned never to be anxious about my life." "You must be a brave man indeed, Sir Priest," the woodcutter replied. "This place has a very bad name. But as the proverb says, the superior man does not needlessly expose himself to peril. My house is only a wretched thatched hut, and I have nothing to offer you in the way of food. But there is a roof, and you can sleep under it without risk. Let me beg you to come home with me." He spoke earnestly, and Kwaidan, liking the kindness in the man's voice, accepted. The woodcutter guided him along a narrow path leading up from the road through mountain forest. It was rough and dangerous, skirting precipices, offering nothing underfoot but slippery roots, winding between masses of jagged rock. But at last, Kwaidan found himself on a cleared space at the top of a hill, with a full moon shining overhead. Before him stood a small thatched cottage, cheerfully lit from within. The woodcutter led him to a shed at the back, where water had been brought through bamboo pipes from a nearby stream. The two men washed their feet. Beyond the shed was a vegetable garden and a grove of cedars and bamboo. And beyond the trees, a cascade shimmered in the moonlight, pouring down from some higher place, swaying like a long white robe. As Kwaidan entered the cottage, he perceived 4 other persons, men and women, warming their hands at a small fire in the main room. They bowed low to the priest and greeted him with great respect. Kwaidan was surprised. These were poor people, living in deep solitude. And yet they knew the proper forms of greeting as well as any person of refinement. These are good people, he thought to himself. They must have been taught by someone who knew the rules of propriety He turned to his host, the Aruji, as the others called him, and said, "From your speech, and from the welcome of your household, I suspect that you have not always been a woodcutter. Perhaps you once belonged to one of the upper classes." The woodcutter smiled. "Sir, you are not mistaken. Though you find me living as I do now, I was once a person of some distinction. Mine is the story of a ruined life, ruined by my own fault. I was in the service of a daimyo. My rank in that service was not inconsiderable, but I loved women and wine too well. Under the influence of passion, I acted wickedly. My selfishness brought ruin to our house and caused the death of many persons. I became a fugitive. I have carried that weight ever since. I pray that I may yet find some way to make atonement, to re-establish what I destroyed. I do not know if that is possible, but I try to overcome the karma of my errors through sincere repentance, and by helping as far as I can those who are less fortunate." Kwaidan was moved by this. He said, "My friend, I have seen that men prone to great folly in their youth may become, in later years, the most earnest in right living. The Holy Sutras tell us that those strongest in wrongdoing can become, by the power of good resolve, the strongest in right doing. Tonight I shall recite the sutras for your sake, and pray that you may find the strength to overcome whatever karma remains." With that, Kwaidan bade the Aruji good night. He was shown to a very small side room where a bed had been prepared. The others went to sleep, but the priest sat up late, reading the sutras by the light of a paper lantern, praying on behalf of his host. When at last he set down the lantern, he opened the window of his little room to look out at the night before sleeping. The sky was clear. No wind moved. Strong moonlight cast sharp black shadows across the garden and glittered on the dew. Crickets and bell insects filled the air with sound, and the nearby cascade deepened in the stillness of the night. Kwaidan felt thirsty, listening to the water. He remembered the bamboo aqueduct at the back of the house. He thought he could go there and drink without disturbing anyone. Very gently, he pushed apart the sliding screens that separated his room from the main apartment, and he saw, by the light of the lantern, 5 bodies lying on the floor, without heads. For one instant he stood bewildered, imagining a crime. But in the next moment, he saw that there was no blood. The headless necks did not look as though they had been cut. And then he understood. Either this is an illusion made by goblins, or I have been lured into the dwelling of Rokuro-Kubi. He remembered the book Soshinki and what it said, that if one finds the body of a Rokuro-Kubi without its head, and moves the body to another place, the head will never be able to rejoin the neck. And when the head returns and finds its body gone, it will strike itself upon the floor, bounding like a ball, and pant with great fear, and presently die. If these are Rokuro-Kubi, Kwaidan thought, they mean me no good. I shall be justified in following the instructions of the book. He seized the body of the Aruji by the feet. He pulled it to the window, and he pushed it out into the garden. Then he found the back door, which had been barred, and he understood that the heads had left through the smoke hole in the roof, which had been left open. He quietly unbarred the door, went out into the garden, and made his way with great caution to the grove beyond. He heard voices in the grove. He moved toward them, stealing from shadow to shadow, until he found a place to hide behind a tree trunk. And there, from the darkness, he saw the heads, all 5 of them, flitting through the air, chatting as they flew, eating worms and insects they found on the ground and among the branches. Presently the head of the Aruji stopped eating, and it said, "Ah, that traveling priest who came tonight. How fat his body is. When we have eaten him, our bellies will be very well filled. I was foolish to speak to him as I did. It only set him to reciting sutras on my behalf. We cannot touch him while he is praying. But it is nearly morning now. Perhaps he has fallen asleep. Someone go to the house and see what the fellow is doing." At once the head of a young woman rose up and flew to the cottage, lightly as a bat. She was back within minutes, and when she returned, her voice was shaking. "The priest is not in the house. He is gone. But that is not the worst of it. He has taken the body of our Aruji, and I do not know where he has put it." At these words, the head of the Aruji transformed. Its eyes flew open, enormous, terrible. Its hair rose up like bristles. Its teeth came together with a sound like grinding stone. Then it wept, tears of pure rage, and cried, "Since my body has been moved, I can never rejoin it. Then I must die. I must die. And all because of that priest. Before I die, I will reach him. I will tear him. I will devour him. And there he is, behind that tree, hiding behind that tree. See him, the fat coward." All 5 heads sprang at Kwaidan. But the strong priest had already armed himself, pulling a young tree from the ground, roots and all. And with it he swung, knocking the heads away with tremendous blows. 4 of them fled into the darkness, but the head of the Aruji, though struck again and again, continued to hurl itself at the priest, bounding back each time, coming again, until at last it caught him by the left sleeve of his robe and bit down. Kwaidan seized it by the topknot and struck it repeatedly. The head uttered one long moan, and then it was still. It was dead, but its teeth still held the sleeve, and for all his great strength, Kwaidan could not force the jaws open. He went back to the cottage. There he found the other 4 Rokuro-Kubi crouching together, their battered heads reunited to their bodies, their faces bruised and pale. When they saw him at the doorway, they screamed, "The priest! The priest!" and fled through the far door into the woods. The sky to the east was beginning to brighten. Dawn was coming, and Kwaidan knew that the power of goblins was limited to the hours of darkness. He looked at the head still dangling from his sleeve, its face covered in blood and foam and clay. And he laughed. What a souvenir to carry away, he said to himself. The head of a goblin. He gathered his few belongings, and he descended the mountain at a leisurely pace to continue his journey. He travelled on until he came to Suwa in Shinano, and into the main street of Suwa he solemnly walked, with the head swinging at his elbow. Women fainted. Children screamed and ran. A great commotion rose around him until the Torite, the police of those days, seized the priest and took him to jail. They supposed the head to be the head of a murdered man who, at the moment of being killed, had caught his murderer's sleeve in his teeth. Kwaidan only smiled when they questioned him. He said nothing. He passed a night in prison, and the following morning he was brought before the magistrates of the district, who ordered him to explain himself, how a priest had been found with a human head fastened to his sleeve, and why he had dared to parade this crime so shamelessly through the streets. Kwaidan laughed, long and loudly, and then he said, Sirs, I did not fasten the head to my sleeve. It fastened itself there much against my will, and I have committed no crime. For this is not the head of a man, it is the head of a goblin. And if I caused the death of the goblin, I did so only by taking the precautions necessary to protect my own life. And he told them everything, laughing again as he described his encounter with the 5 flying heads. The magistrates did not laugh. They judged him to be a hardened criminal. They found his story an insult to their intelligence. They were on the point of ordering his immediate execution, all of them except one, an old man, a very old man, who had said nothing throughout the entire proceeding. He rose now and said quietly, Let us first examine the head. I do not think this has yet been done. If the priest has told the truth, the head itself should bear witness for him. Bring it here. The head was placed before the judges, still gripping in its teeth the koromo that had been stripped from Kwaidan's shoulders. The old man turned it carefully, examining every surface. And on the nape of the neck he found strange red characters, written in a form that was not quite human. He pointed them out to his colleagues. He also drew their attention to the line of severance at the neck, which showed no sign of having been cut by any weapon. It was smooth as the line at which a leaf detaches itself from its stem in autumn. The elder straightened. I am quite certain, he said, that this priest has told us nothing but the truth. This is the head of a Rokuro-Kubi. In the book Nanhō Ibutsushi, it is written that certain red characters can always be found upon the nape of the neck of a true Rokuro-Kubi. There are the characters. You can see for yourselves that they have not been painted. Moreover, it is well known that such goblins have been dwelling in the mountains of Kai from very ancient times. Then he turned to Kwaidan. But you, sir, What kind of sturdy priest are you? You have shown a courage that few priests possess. You have the bearing of a soldier rather than a man of religion. Perhaps you once belonged to the samurai class. You have guessed rightly, Kwaidan replied. Before becoming a priest, I long followed the profession of arms. In those days I never feared man or devil. My name then was Isogai Heidazaemon Taketsura of Kyushu. There may be some among you who remember it. At the sound of that name, a murmur moved through the court. There were many present who remembered it. And Kwaidan found himself, in an instant, surrounded not by judges but by friends. Friends eager to show their admiration through kindness. He was escorted with full honor to the residence of the daimyo, who welcomed him, feasted him, and made him a handsome gift before allowing him to depart. When Kwaidan left Suwa, he was as happy as any priest is permitted to be in this transitory world. As for the head, he took it with him. A day or two after leaving Suwa, he encountered a robber. The man stopped him in a lonesome place and told him to hand over his belongings. Kwaidan calmly removed his koromo and offered it. The robber took it and then saw what was hanging from the sleeve. He was a bold man, but he was startled. He dropped the garment and stepped back. Then he stared at the priest. What kind of a priest are you? You are a worse man than I am. It is true that I have killed people, but I never walked about with anyone's head fastened to my sleeve. Well, Sir Priest, I must say that I admire you. Now that head would be useful to me. I could frighten people with it. Will you sell it? You can have my robe in exchange for your koromo, and I will give you 5 ryo for the head. Kwaidan answered, I will let you have the head and the robe if you insist. But I must tell you, this is not the head of a man. It is a goblin's head. So if you buy it, and have any trouble as a result, please remember that I did not deceive you. What a nice priest you are, said the robber. You kill men and joke about it. But I am in earnest. Here is the robe. Here is the money. Give me the head. Take it, said Kwaidan. I was not joking. The only joke, if there is any joke at all, is that you are fool enough to pay good money for a goblin's head. And Kwaidan, laughing loudly, went on his way. For a time the robber used the head and the robe to play at being a goblin priest upon the highways. But when he reached the neighborhood of Suwa, he learned the true story of the head. And fear came over him. Fear that the spirit of the Rokuro-Kubi might yet find a way to make him pay. He made up his mind to carry the head back to the place it had come from, and to bury it with the body. He found the lonely cottage in the mountains of Kai, but no one was there, and he could not find the body, and so he buried the head alone in the grove behind the cottage. He had a tombstone set up above the grave, and he arranged for a segaki service to be performed on behalf of the spirit of the Rokuro-Kubi. That tombstone known as the tombstone of the Rokuro-Kubi, may be seen, so the old storytellers say, even unto this day. In a village of Musashi Province, there lived two woodcutters, Mosaku and Minokichi. At the time of this story, Mosaku was an old man, and Minokichi, his apprentice, was a lad of 18 years. Every day they went together to a forest about 5 miles from their village. On the way to that forest, there is a wide river to cross. There is a ferry boat. Several times a bridge had been built at that crossing, but the river always took it. No common bridge can resist that current when the water rises. One very cold evening, as the two woodcutters were making their way home, a great snowstorm overtook them. They reached the ferry and found that the boatman had gone, leaving his boat on the far side of the water. There was no crossing, and it was no weather for swimming. They took shelter in the ferryman's hut, glad enough to find any shelter at all. The hut was very small, only 2 mats wide, with a single door and no window. There was no brazier, no place to make a fire. They fastened the door, lay down, and pulled their straw raincoats over them. At first, the cold was bearable. They told themselves the storm would pass. The old man fell asleep almost immediately, but Minokichi lay awake, listening to the wind, that awful, unrelenting wind, and the constant lashing of snow against the door. The river roared outside. The little hut swayed and creaked like a boat at sea. The air grew colder with every passing minute. Minokichi shivered under his coat, but at last, in spite of everything, he too fell asleep. He was woken by snow on his face. The door had been forced open, and by the snowlight, the Yuki-Onna, that pale blue glow that snow throws in the dark, he saw a woman in the room. A woman all in white. She was bending over Mosaku and blowing her breath upon him. Her breath was like a white smoke, bright and cold, curling up from the old man's face. Then she turned. She came toward Minokichi. She stooped over him. He tried to cry out and found that he could make no sound. The white woman leaned closer, lower and lower, until her face nearly touched his, and he saw that she was very beautiful, though her eyes made him afraid. For a moment she only looked at him. Then she smiled, and she whispered, "I intended to treat you the same as the other man, but I cannot help feeling some pity for you, because you are so young. You are a pretty boy, Minokichi, and I will not hurt you now. But if you ever tell anyone, even your own mother, about what you have seen tonight, I shall know it, and then I will kill you. Remember what I say." With those words, she turned from him and passed through the open doorway. The moment she was gone, Minokichi found he could move again. He sprang up. He looked out into the storm. But the woman was nowhere to be seen. Only the snow, driving furiously into the hut. He pushed the door shut and wedged it with billets of wood. He told himself perhaps the wind had blown it open. He told himself perhaps he had been dreaming, that the figure in white had been nothing but the gleam of snowlight through the gap in the door, but he could not be sure. He called out to Mosaku. The old man did not answer. Minokichi reached out in the dark and touched his face. It was ice. Mosaku was dead. By dawn, the storm had passed. When the ferryman returned at sunrise, he found Minokichi lying senseless beside the frozen body of his master. Minokichi was carried home and cared for. He recovered, but slowly. He was a long time ill from the cold of that night, and he was greatly shaken by the death of the old man. But he said nothing about the woman in white, not a word. When he was well enough, he went back to his work, going to the forest alone each morning, returning at nightfall with his wood, which his mother helped him to sell. The seasons turned. Winter became spring. Spring became summer. And then it was winter again. One evening, in the winter of the following year, as Minokichi was walking home along the road, he came upon a girl traveling in the same direction. She was tall and slender, and very good-looking. Her voice, when she returned his greeting, was as pleasant to the ear as the voice of a songbird. He fell into step beside her, and they began to talk. She told him her name was Oyuki, that she had recently lost both of her parents, that she was traveling to Yedo, where she had some distant relations who might help her find work as a servant. The more Minokichi looked at her, the more beautiful she seemed. He asked if she was betrothed. She laughed and said she was free. She asked if he was married. He told her no, that he had only his widowed mother to care for, and that the question of a wife had not yet been considered. They walked on together for a long while after that, saying nothing. But as the old proverb goes, when the wish is there, the eyes can say as much as the mouth. By the time they reached the village, they were very much taken with each other, and Minokichi asked Oyuki to come and rest a while at his house. After a moment's hesitation, she went with him. His mother welcomed her warmly and prepared a meal. Oyuki's manner was so gentle, so pleasing in every way, that Minokichi's mother took an immediate liking to her and persuaded her to delay her journey to Yedo. And as these things go, Oyuki never went to Yedo at all. She stayed. She became Minokichi's wife. She was a good wife and a good daughter-in-law. When Minokichi's mother died, some 5 years later, her last words were words of love and praise for the woman her son had married. Oyuki bore Minokichi 10 children, boys and girls, all of them handsome, all of them notably fair of skin. The people of the village thought Oyuki remarkable, different from ordinary people, by some quality they could not name. Most peasant women aged early. But Oyuki, even after 10 children, looked as young and fresh as the day she had first walked into the village. One night, after the children had gone to sleep, Oyuki was sitting by the paper lamp, sewing. Minokichi watched her, the light falling soft and white across her face. And he said, "Watching you there, in the lamplight, you make me think of something strange that happened to me when I was 18 years old. I saw someone then as beautiful as you are now, as white as you are. She was very like you, in fact." Oyuki did not look up from her sewing. "Tell me about her," she said. "Where did you see her?" And Mimi-no-Kichi told her. He told her about the terrible night in the ferryman's hut, about the storm, about the woman in white who had bent over him in the snowlight, smiling, whispering her warning, about Mosaku, frozen to death beside him. He said, "Asleep or awake, that was the only time I ever saw anyone as beautiful as you. She was not a human being, I knew that, and I was afraid of her. But she was so white. I have never been quite certain whether it was a dream, or whether I truly saw the woman of the snow." Oh, Yuki flung down her sewing. She stood up. She leaned over him where he sat, and her voice, when she spoke, was no longer soft. "It was I. Yuki, it was. And I told you then that I would kill you if you ever spoke one word of it. Were it not for those children sleeping there, I would kill you this moment. But now, listen to me carefully. You must take very, very good care of them. If they ever have cause to complain of you, I will come back, and I will treat you as you deserve." Even as she spoke, her voice grew thin, like wind, like the sound of wind through a narrow place. And then she dissolved, melting into a bright white mist that rose toward the roof beams, shuddered, and slipped away through the smoke hole into the winter dark. She was never seen again. On the Akasaka Road, in Tokyo, there is a slope called Kinokuni-zaka. It means the slope of the province of Ki. Why it is called that I cannot tell you. On one side of this slope there is an ancient moat, deep and very wide, with high green banks rising up toward gardens. On the other side of the road run the long, pale walls of an imperial palace. Before the age of street lamps and jinrikishas, this part of the city was very lonesome after dark. Travelers who found themselves out late would go miles out of their way. Miles, rather than walk up the Kinokuni-zaka alone after sunset. All because of a Mujina that used to walk there. The last man to see the Mujina was an old merchant of the Kyobashi quarter. He died about 30 years ago. But before he died, he told the story. This is what he said. One night, at a late hour, he was hurrying up the Kinokuni-zaka when he saw a woman crouching alone by the moat. She was weeping bitterly, in the dark, all by herself. He was a kind man. He stopped. He was afraid she meant to throw herself in. He went toward her carefully, not wanting to startle her. She appeared to be slight and graceful. Her clothes were fine. Her hair was arranged the way a young woman of good family would wear it. He spoke to her gently. "Oh, Jochu, do not cry like that. Tell me what troubles you. If there is any way I can help, I will help you." But she went on weeping, hiding her face behind the long sleeve of her robe. He tried again, softer this time. "Oh, Jochu, please listen to me. This is no place for a young lady at night. Please do not cry. Only tell me, how can I help you?" Slowly she rose, but she turned her back to him. She went on sobbing behind her sleeve. He reached out and laid his hand gently on her shoulder. "Oh, Jochu, just for one moment, please listen. Oh, Jochu. Oh, Jochu." Then she turned around. She dropped her sleeve. She stroked her hand across her face, and the merchant saw that she had no eyes, no nose, no mouth, nothing, only smooth, pale skin where a face should have been. He screamed. He ran. Up the Kinokuni-zaka he ran, and all before him was black and empty. He did not look back. He ran until his legs could barely carry him, and then he ran still further, until far ahead, very far, he saw a point of light, faint as a firefly. He ran toward it. It was only the lantern of a SOH bar seller, a peddler who had set his little stand by the side of the road. But any light was good. Any human presence was good. The merchant threw himself down at the peddler's feet, gasping, "Ko-re, ko-re." The SOH barman said sharply, "What is the matter with you? Has somebody hurt you?" "No, nobody hurt me. Only scared you then," the peddler said without much sympathy. "Robbers. Not robbers. Not robbers. I saw a woman by the moat, and she showed me. I cannot tell you what she showed me." "Was it anything like this that she showed you?" And he stroked his own face with his hand, and his face became like an egg, and the light went out. Eight centuries ago, the priests of Mugenyama in the province of Totomi decided that their temple needed a great bell, a bell of bronze, a bell whose sound would carry across the hills and the rice fields and call the faithful to prayer. But bronze was costly, and so the priests asked the women of their parish to help them by donating their old bronze mirrors to be melted down for bell metal. Now, mirrors were not small things to give. In those days, a woman's mirror was among her most precious possessions, passed down from mother to daughter, carrying with it the memory of every face it had ever reflected. But the women of Mugenyama were devout, and one by one, they brought their mirrors to the temple. Among them was a young woman, a farmer's wife living not far from the temple grounds. She brought her mirror. She placed it among the others in the courtyard, and she walked home. But almost immediately, she regretted it. The mirror had belonged to her mother, and to her mother's mother before that, and to her grandmother before that. She thought of all the faces it had held, all the quiet mornings, all the careful arrangements of hair, all the private smiles that no one else had seen. She had given all of that away, and she had not even been asked to give something so dear. She had simply not thought. She had no money to buy it back. And so whenever she went to the temple, she would see it there, lying in the courtyard among hundreds of other mirrors. She always recognized it. On its back, in relief, was the Shochikubai, the pine, the bamboo, and the plum flower. She would look at it. She would think about taking it. But the moment never came. And she began to feel as though she had given away not just an object, but a part of herself. She remembered the old saying, that a mirror is the soul of a woman, and she feared in ways she could not quite explain that this was true in stranger and darker ways than she had ever imagined. When the mirrors were finally sent to the foundry, the bell founders made a discovery. One mirror would not melt. They tried again and again. They subjected it to the full heat of the furnace, and still it sat there, hard and cold, as though the fire meant nothing to it. The founders understood what this meant. The woman who had given that mirror had not given it freely. Her soul, still attached to it, still clinging, was keeping it whole, was keeping it cold, was refusing, through the metal, to let go. It did not take long for everyone to know whose mirror it was. The pine, the bamboo, the plum flower on the back. There was no hiding it. And so the young woman's secret, her regret, her longing, her failure to give wholeheartedly, was made known to everyone. The shame of it was more than she could carry. She drowned herself. Before she did, she wrote a farewell letter, and in that letter, she left these words: "When I am dead, it will not be difficult to melt the mirror and cast the bell. But, to the person who breaks that bell by ringing it, great wealth will be given by the ghost of me." After the bell was cast, and it was cast successfully, just as she had said it would be, people remembered the letter. They believed it. Of course they believed it. A woman had died with those words on her lips. And so they came. In great numbers, they came to ring the bell. Day after day, hour after hour. They rang it furiously, recklessly, caring nothing for the protests of the priests, caring only for the promise that whoever broke the bell would receive great wealth from the ghost of the woman who had died for it. The ringing became a torment. The priests could not stop it. And so, in the end, they solved the problem in the only way left to them. They rolled the bell down the hill and into a swamp at the bottom. The swamp received it, the dark water closed over it, and the bell was gone. Only its legend remained. The Mugen cane, the bell of Mugen. But legends have a way of doing their own work long after the thing itself has vanished. There is an old belief, a magical practice, called Nazarairu. It means to substitute one thing for another in imagination, and to act upon the substitute as though it were the real thing. It was understood that such actions could carry real consequence. If you found the footprints of a robber in your garden, for instance, and burned a moxa on each of them, the soles of the robber's feet would grow inflamed and painful wherever he was until he returned. The substitution was real. The effect was real. And so, after the bell was lost, people who still wanted what the ghost had promised began to find substitutes. They would take an object made of bronze, declare it to be the Mugen cane, and beat upon it until it broke. One such person was a woman named Umegai. She was in desperate need of money. She took a bronze basin, held it in her mind to be the bell, and beat upon it with all the fury of her need, crying out for 300 pieces of gold. A guest at the inn where she lived heard her story, and, whether moved by pity or by something stranger, he gave her the gold, 300 pieces, just as she had cried out for. Word of this spread. Others tried. Among them was a farmer, a dissolute man who had wasted everything he owned. He made for himself a model of the Mugen cane out of clay. He set it before him. He beat upon it. He broke it. And he cried out, with all the desperation of a ruined man, for great wealth. The ground before him shifted, and from it rose a figure, a woman, robed in white, her long hair loose and unbound, holding before her a covered jar. She looked at him, and she spoke. "I have come to answer your prayer as it deserves to be answered. Take therefore this jar." He seized it. He ran into his house. He called his wife. Together they set the jar down. It was heavy, heavier than it looked, and together they lifted the lid. The jar was filled to the very brim, with... But no, I cannot tell you what was in it. "300 years ago, in the village called Asamimura, in the district called Onsen-go-ri, in the province of Iyo, there lived a good man named Toku-be-i. Toku-be-i was the richest person in that district, and the Mura-osa, the head man of his village. In most things, he had been fortunate, but he had reached the age of 40 without knowing the happiness of becoming a father. And this grief, quiet and persistent, sat at the center of his life like a stone. He and his wife turned to prayer. They prayed to the divinity Fudo-myoho, whose famous temple, Sai-hoji, stood in Asami-mura. Day after day they prayed, and at last their prayers were heard. His wife gave birth to a daughter. The child was very pretty. They named her Tsuyu. Because the mother's milk was not sufficient, a nurse was hired for the little one, a woman called Osohde. And Osohde loved the child as though she were her own. Otsuyu grew up to be a beautiful girl. But when she reached the age of 15, she fell gravely ill. The doctors came. They looked at her, and they believed she was going to die. It was then that Osode went to the temple. Every day for 21 days she walked to Sighoji and knelt before Fudo-sama and prayed, with everything she had, for the life of the girl she loved. On the last day of those 21 days, Otsuyu recovered. Suddenly, completely, as if the illness had simply released her. There was great joy in the house of Tokubehi. A feast was prepared. Friends were gathered. There was food and light and laughter. But on the night of the feast, Osode was taken ill. And the following morning the doctor came to her bedside and said that she was dying. The family gathered around her. They wept. They tried to say farewell. But Osode raised her hand and spoke to them quietly. "It is time that I told you something you do not know. I went to Fudo-sama, and I asked that I might be permitted to die in the place of Otsuyu, and that great favor has been granted to me. So you must not grieve. I am glad. I was happy to do this. But I have one small request. I made a promise to Fudo-sama that a cherry tree would be planted in the garden of Sighoji as a thank offering. I will not be able to plant it myself now, and so I must ask you to fulfill that promise for me. Goodbye, dear friends. Remember that I was happy to die for Otsuyu's sake. After the funeral of Osode, the parents of Otsuyu went to find a cherry tree, the finest that could be found, and they planted it in the garden of Sighoji. The tree grew, it flourished, and on the 16th day of the second month of the following year, the anniversary of Osode's death, it blossomed. Not gently, not modestly, but in a way that made people stop and stand very still and look. So it continued. For 254 years, that tree blossomed. Always on the 16th day of the second month. Never a day before, never a day after. And its flowers, pink and white, were said to resemble the warmth of a woman's love for a child that was not her own. The people of that place gave the tree a name. They called it the cherry tree of the milk nurse, and they say it is blooming still. A long time ago in the province of Tamba, there lived a rich merchant named Inamuraya Gensuke. He had a daughter called Osono. She was clever and pretty, and her father thought it would be a pity to let her grow up with only what the country teachers could offer. And so he arranged for her to be sent to Kyoto, in the care of trusted attendants, to be educated in the polite accomplishments taught to the ladies of the capital. When her education was complete, she was married to a friend of her father's family, a merchant named Nagaraya. She lived happily with him for nearly 4 years. They had one child, a boy. But in the 4th year of her marriage, Osono fell ill, and she died. On the night after her funeral, her little son came to the family and said that his mother had come back. She was upstairs, in her room. She had looked at him and smiled, but she would not speak to him. And so he had become frightened and run away. Some of the family went upstairs to the room that had been Osono's. A small lamp was burning there, kindled before a shrine, and by its light, they saw her. The figure of the dead woman, standing before her tansu, the wooden chest of drawers that still held her ornaments and her clothes. Her head and shoulders were clearly visible, but from the waist downward, the figure faded into nothing, transparent as a shadow cast on water. She stood there gazing at the chest, not speaking, not moving, only looking. The family went back downstairs, shaken. They spoke quietly among themselves, and the mother of Osono's husband said, "A woman is fond of her small things. Osono was always attached to her belongings. Perhaps she has come back to look at them. Many of the dead will do this, unless their things are given to the parish temple. If we bring Osono's robes and ornaments to the temple, her spirit will probably find its rest." Everyone agreed. The very next morning, the drawers were emptied. All of Osono's dresses and ornaments were carried to the temple. But she came back that night, and the night after that, and every night that followed. She came back and stood before the empty tansu and looked at it with that same quiet, searching expression. And the house became a house of unease. The mother of Osono's husband went at last to the parish temple and told the head priest everything. The temple was a Zen temple, and the head priest was a learned old man known as Daigen Osho. He listened carefully. Then he said, "There must be something that troubles her, something in or near that tansu." "But we emptied all the drawers," the old woman replied. "There is nothing left in it." "Nevertheless," said Daigen Osho, "tonight I will go to your house and keep watch in that room and see what can be done. Give orders that no one is to enter while I am there, unless I call." After sundown, the priest went to the house. The room was prepared for him. He sat alone, reading the sutras as the night deepened around him. Nothing appeared. The hours passed quietly. And then, after the hour of the rat, in the stillness between midnight and dawn, the figure of Osono outlined itself before the tansu. Her face had a wistful expression. Her eyes were fixed on the chest. The priest spoke the holy formula prescribed for such occasions. Then he addressed the figure by the kaimyo of Osono, her posthumous Buddhist name, the name given to the dead. "I have come here to help you," he said. "Perhaps there is something in that tansu about which you have reason to feel anxious. Shall I try to find it for you?" The shadow seemed to give a slight nod. The priest rose. He opened the top drawer. Empty. He opened the second, the third, the fourth. He searched behind each drawer and beneath them. He examined every corner of the chest. He found nothing. And yet the figure remained, gazing just as before, with that same quiet look of longing. The priest stood still and thought. And then it occurred to him. There might be something hidden beneath the paper that lined the drawers. He removed the lining of the first. Nothing. The second. Nothing. The third. Nothing. But under the lining of the lowest drawer, he found a letter. He held it. He looked up at the figure. "Is this the thing that has been troubling you?" The shadow of the woman turned slowly toward him, her faint eyes fixed upon the letter. "Shall I burn it for you?" he asked. She bowed before him. "It shall be burned at the temple this very morning," he promised. "And no one shall read it, except myself." The figure smiled and vanished. Dawn was beginning to lighten the sky as the priest came downstairs to find the family waiting below. "Do not be anxious," he said. "She will not appear again." And she never did. The letter was burned. It was a love letter, written to Osono during the years of her studies in Kyoto. but the priest alone knew what was in it, and the secret died with him. Like something from a dream, the cherry tree of the 16th day has bloomed again. In Wakegō-ri, a district of the province of Iiyo, there is a very ancient cherry tree. It is called Jiu-Roku-Zakura, the cherry tree of the 16th day, because it blooms every year on the 16th day of the first month by the old lunar calendar, and only on that day. The 16th day of the first month falls in the period of great cold. It is not the time for cherry blossoms. Cherry trees wait for spring. They wait for warmth, for lengthening days, for the slow returning of the light. But the Jiu-Roku-Zakura does not wait. It blooms in the cold, in the snow, on that one particular day, and no other. Because the life that moves through it is not, or at least was not originally, its own. There is the ghost of a man in that tree. He was a samurai of Iiyo. The tree grew in his garden. In its natural years, it had flowered at the usual time, late March, early April, like any other cherry tree. He had played beneath it as a child. His parents had loved it, his grandparents before them. For more than 100 years, his family had hung bright strips of colored paper from its blossoming branches, strips inscribed with poems of praise, season after season, generation after generation. The samurai grew old. He outlived all of his children, and the tree became the one remaining thing in the world that he loved. Then, in the summer of a certain year, the tree withered and died. His grief was very great. Kind neighbors, wanting to comfort him, found a young and beautiful cherry tree and planted it in his garden, hoping to comfort him. He thanked them. He pretended to be glad. But the pain in his heart did not ease. He had loved the old tree for his entire life. Nothing could take its place. And then a thought came to him. He remembered something. A way, perhaps, by which the dying tree might yet be saved. It was the 16th day of the first month. He went alone into his garden. He stood before the withered tree. He bowed down before it, and he spoke to it. Deign, I beseech you, to bloom once more, because I am going to die in your stead. It is believed, it has long been believed, that a person can truly give away their life to another person, or to a living creature, or even to a tree, by the grace and permission of the gods. To give one's life in this way, to step forward as a substitute, is expressed by the words Migawari ni tatsu, to stand in another's place. He spread a white cloth beneath the tree. He arranged his coverings upon it. He sat down, and in the manner of a samurai, he ended his life. His ghost passed into the tree, and the tree bloomed in that same hour in the cold, in the snow, in the middle of winter. And every year, on the 16th day of the first month, in the season of snow, it blooms again.